Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to the Svemin Digital Environmental Conference. Glad to be back here in the studio below the Svemin office downtown Stockholm, and I will walk you through this second day of this conference. And my name is Emma Hardmark, and I'm a Director of Communication here at Svemin. Svemin is the Swedish Mining Association, as you all know. And this fourth session that we will focus on here will be the important issue of tailings dam safety. And actually, back in 1999, when we held the first Svemin Environmental Conference, that was the theme for that year, that first environmental conference. That was held in Skellefteå. So the question about tailings dam safety is still around very much. Just like yesterday, we are using the Menti platform to pose questions to our speakers, and on that, the Menti platform, you can share your thoughts or when you send in comments to share with us. And we will, in the end of the two sessions that we have left today, we will have a panel discussion. And the code is not the same as yesterday, so if you logged in yesterday, you need to log in again. So you go to menti.com and use the code 2461790. That is 2461790. Just a few months ago, the ICMM launched their new global industry standard on tailings management. That's a massive document. And we are very happy to have someone here to go through this important document with us. Please welcome the CEO and Director Environment Program at ICMM, Aidan Davey.
Emma, thank you very much for that introduction. And thanks to Svemin for inviting us to this very important event. Before I go into what will be the first part of
now at least I can see John Houchin. Hi, John. We're waiting for Aidan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Our guys in the studio, they're working hard to get the right face on screen. Like I mentioned yesterday, this is the very first digital conference that we host, so bear with us these technical issues that we sometimes run into. We are doing our best to... Are we up and running now? Okay, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Emma, can you hear me?
We cannot hear you. Are you muted, or have we muted you?
I am not muted. Hi, can you hear me?
You can start, please. Go ahead.
Yes, you can hear me, Emma? Okay, good. Well, listen, thank you very much for that introduction, Emma. It's a great pleasure to be here at this Svemin event. And thank you for the opportunity to participate in what I think is a very important conversation. Just before I go into my presentation, I should clarify one point, and that is that I'll be speaking today for the first part of this event about the global industry standard on tailings management, which was a product of a collaborative effort between the ICMM, the Principles for Responsible Investment, and the United Nations Environment Programme. So it is very much co-owned and co-developed by those three parties. I guess the context and the background to this work was the tragic events at Brumadinho on the 25th of January last year. And not only was Brumadinho a human and environmental tragedy, but it was also, I think, the greatest loss of life we had seen in relation to any tailings incident in over 25 years or 30 years indeed. I think the last time the world had seen anything on this scale was at Stava in northern Italy in 1985. And I think we must never forget the men and women who lost their lives during that incident, because they serve as a constant reminder of the need for us to learn from past mistakes and to do better when it comes to the management of tailings storage facilities. In terms of the immediate impact of that incident, I think firstly we saw very strongly critical press reaction of Vale, but also of the industry's inability to readily provide information on tailing storage facilities. Equally, there was an extremely strong and negative reaction from investors. And I think they were concerned about the inability of companies to point to potential unquantified major risk exposures within their portfolios. They were also concerned about the inability of companies to easily provide information on tailing storage facilities. Sometimes very basic information was not at the fingertips of companies. And I think there was a sense of their concern at their own failure to follow up on concerns that had arisen around the Samarco incident at the end of 2015, which perhaps had not been followed through fully. We saw the market reacting unfavorably with respect to Vale, but I think more importantly, we also saw very significant industry stakeholders, including the PRI, UNEP, and others, expressing very strong concerns to ICMM and really calling on ICMM for industry leadership at that point. In response, I think what we attempted to do was to engage with our senior leadership very, very rapidly. And so within a month, our Council of CEOs, which is essentially our board, met together in Miami to discuss how best to respond. And at that point, the decision they made and the commitment was to conduct a global tailings review with an eye to developing an international standard for the management of tailings storage facilities. But it was very, very clear that going it alone was not an option. And so on that basis, the early decision was that we ought to work collaboratively with co-conveners. And so we quickly moved into conversation with the Principles for Responsible Investment and UNEP, both of whom had been in touch with us about the potential to co-convene this process. And we agreed on both a scope and approach to doing that and issued a press release to that effect towards the end of March 2019. Less than a month later, Professor Bruno Aberl was appointed as chair of the Global Tailings Review in April 2019. And then the process really, I think, began in earnest at the beginning of May when he first met with a broader advisory group, which I'll come on to in a moment. But the substantive work of the standard, I think it's fair to say, began at the end of June, beginning of July in 2019. Just to say a little bit about the governance of the Global Tailings Review. As I've mentioned, it was a co-convened process. It is sometimes referred to as an ICMM standard, but it is truly the product of the work of the three co-conveners. At the heart of the process was the chair, Professor Bruno Aberle, who I mentioned, and he went through a process of appointing 7, I think, respected and esteemed experts who could support him in the important work of developing the standard. There was also a multi-stakeholder advisory group, and the intention there was that multi-stakeholder advisory group bring perspectives that might not necessarily be fully represented within the expert panel, and that included people from academia, civil society, industry tailings experts, insurance, legal advisors, representatives of multilateral organizations, and indeed oversight institutions. The standard itself was issued as a draft for consultation in November of 2019, and it was put out in 7 different languages. The consultations took place across multiple jurisdictions, and there were a series of webinars as well, focused on ESG and technical aspects in a variety of languages. So a really thorough process of external engagement with a view to helping shape the final content of the standard. And indeed, all of the product of that public consultation process is online and freely available. And then finally, I guess, just a little bit more than a year after the substantive work began, the standard was launched in August of this year. And I guess it's really the first global tailings standard that can be applied to both existing and future tailings facilities. At the point of launch, it was endorsed by all 3 co-conveners, and it has since, I think, been widely disseminated. Now, to just set the stage slightly for this conversation we're having today, I wanted to say a little bit about the content of the standard as well, because I think sometimes we talk slightly in the abstract, But overall, the standard comprises 6 separate topic areas. Within those topic areas, there are 15 individual principles, but beneath those principles, we have a number of requirements, and the total number of requirements within the Global Tailing Standard are 77. But I'm going to just focus at the topic level, those 6 topics, and say a little bit about those, and also to indicate the principles that sit beneath the topic areas. And this will be very much an impressionistic sense of what is in the standard, but all of the content, both of the standard and the associated documents, are available on the Global Tailings Review website, which is globaltailingsreview.org. So the first of the 6 topic areas is around affected communities. And here the emphasis is very much around respect for human rights through the conduct of human rights due diligence. It's also around meaningful engagement with project affected people, with specific emphasis on indigenous peoples where they're present in the vicinity of tailing storage facilities. The second of the 6 topic areas speaks to this concept of an integrated knowledge base. And the idea of an integrated knowledge base is really to bring together information about the social, environmental, and the economic context of a tailings facility, with a view to having that inform decision-making by operators and key stakeholders throughout the tailings facility life cycle. And that knowledge base you will see being referred to in numerous different places within the standard. There are 2 principles that sit beneath this particular topic area, and between them they account for 8 individual requirements. The third and one of the most substantive parts of the Global Tailing Standard is around design, construction, operation, and monitoring. And again, within this particular topic area, we've got 4 separate principles. Collectively, there's more than 20 individual requirements that apply to those 4 separate principles. But the focus here is all about the integrity of the design to establish reliable systems for construction, operation, and monitoring throughout the life cycle, with a view to minimizing the risk of failure. And again, I think the critical point that's built into the standard is this notion around the dynamic nature of both environmental, social, and local economic contexts, which speaks to the need to be able to demonstrate the ability to upgrade the facility to a higher consequence classification where required, or if that's not possible, to protect the ability to reduce the consequences of potential failure. So it's a very significant number of requirements under this topic area. The 4th topic area is all about management and governance. And management and governance was the focus of a position statement on tailings governance that ICMM put out in the wake of the Samarco tailings disaster back at the end of 2015. But clearly more needed to be done. Having said that, management and governance remains a critically important part of the Global Tailing Standard. Again, within this particular area, there are 4 principles and collectively more than 20 requirements around the topic of management and governance. And the focus here is all about assigning responsibility and accountability for key roles for the management of tailings across the life cycle. And that includes standards for critical systems and processes that are fundamental to ensuring the integrity of the facility throughout its life cycle. There's a strong emphasis here on cross-functional collaboration, on institutional memory, and organizational culture as well. And the 5th of the 6 topic areas is all about emergency response, but also a focus on long-term recovery. The 2 principles that sit beneath this are firstly about emergency response, but secondly, how do you prepare for long-term recovery in the event of a catastrophic failure? And so the emphasis here is about establishing community-focused emergency preparedness and response plans, but also about making sure you've got adequate capacity, both internally and within the public sector agencies, to respond and engage with communities and others to prepare in the event of a failure. And the emphasis is also on the long-term recovery of communities, but also the natural environment in the event of a catastrophic failure. Then finally, the sixth topic area is all about public disclosure and access to information. And I think this is very much cognizant of the need for greater information to be available, and speaks to, I think, the deficit we found ourselves in post-Brumadinho, when there was very little information that was readily accessible. And so this topic indicates a number of items for disclosure on an annual basis. And it also speaks to the importance of committing to participate in global initiatives for the creation of standardized, independent, industry-wide, publicly accessible information on the safety and integrity of tailings facilities. That's been kind of a whistle-stop tour through what is, an approximately 40-page document. I really do invite you to look at that online. But finally, before I stop for this part of my presentation, just to say, why is the standard different perhaps to some of the documents that have preceded it? And I think it's different for a number of reasons. And firstly, because it adopts this integrated perspective, whereby the social, environmental, and technical considerations are all addressed in a comprehensive manner within a single standard. Secondly, it's very much got a focus on the entire tailings facility life cycle, from the point of site selection through design, construction, management and monitoring to closure and post-closure. It takes an integrated approach and looks to try and address potential risks of catastrophic failure that may occur at any of those stages. I think a third key attribute of the standard is its focus on elevating accountability to the very highest organizational levels. And it brings in new requirements for independent oversight that apply to many different aspects of the standard, for example, around the conduct of alternatives analysis. And then lastly, it establishes very clear expectations around global transparency and disclosure requirements. I'm going to speak a little bit later on about ICMM's response to the standard, but I think I should stop there and turn it back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you very much. And like you mentioned, you're coming back in shortly to give us more comments. Last year, when we held our environmental conference in Skellefteå, we had John Hautjen from Swedish National Pension Funds with us. He gave a presentation on what's important from the investor's point of view. Since then, this new standard has been launched. And so, John, are you all happy now?
Well, I'm happy to be here. I'm just going to get the slideshow up. Can you hear me properly?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Excellent. So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me once again. Well, it's been a long ride, and thank you for the presentation, Aidan, and thank you for the cooperation on the standard. I think we've achieved something really good here. I'm going to pull you back a bit, like Aidan did, and I'm going to tell you a bit about the Mining and Tailings Dam Safety Initiative that I told you about last year. Based on what happened in Brumadinho, I'm not going to show you the video again like I did last year. Within a couple of days, the Church of England Pensions Board and the Council on Ethics, the Swedish National Pension Funds, decided to set up this project. It was pretty clear, as I described last time, and as Aidan alluded to, that these are my own pictures from Mariana, from the Mariana Samarco site in Brazil, that the response from the investment community post Mariana was not strong enough. We failed, and we concluded that we were not going to fail this time. It's really important for the mining industry to understand we can't continue to have the...
John,
yes?
the technicians tell me that we can't see your pictures.
You can't see my pictures.
Maybe you should try to share your screen or your presentation again.
All right, we'll do it again. Here we go. Why isn't that working? Share screen. Now?
Does it come out correct? Yeah, now it's okay.
Right. There we go.
Full screen. Please choose full screen. They're
yeah,
telling me.
I think Yeah.
Okay, now over to you. Please continue.
Yeah, so no, that's not working. Sorry about that. But these are my own pictures from Mariana. And I think we should not forget, even though fortunately less lives were lost at Mariana, this is still an ongoing disaster zone with many years to finalize the cleanup. And unfortunately, the villages at Mariana has not been rebuilt yet, which is still part of the general criticism against Vale. This is taking far too long time, and it is building a hostile environment among communities in Brazil against mining in general. And the response is simply not strong enough, I'm sorry to say. We are not happy with this outcome. So there are a number of issues in the Brazilian context in regards to mining that still needs to be addressed, but we're not going to talk about them here. We're going to talk about the general situation in the mining industry. We were pretty clear after Brumadinho that we had no confidence left in the mining company Vale. This was a surprisingly big story in Sweden, considering this is a Brazilian mining site. But mining tends to get a lot of attention. Responsible mining tends to get a lot of attention in Sweden. And Sweden has a long and proud history of mining, so I can understand that. As you remember, we had a session with the Pope. I described that last year, and we had representatives coming up from Brumadinho, blessing those who passed away. It was a good signal to the communities in Brumadinho. We've been working closely with the communities in Brumadinho, and we continue to work closely with the communities in Brumadinho and Mariana as well as part of this project. This is really important for us. You know the key issue here. I think it's important to remind ourselves what the key issue here is. It's probably not tailings dams. It is unfortunately that we're mining too much, we're generating too much tailings, and we need to mine smarter. I think this is the long-term discussion that we need to address. We need to have a thorough discussion. Happily, we've got some excellent suppliers to the mining industry based in Sweden, like Sandvik and Epiroc, and I'm really proud of these companies. I think we need to have a bigger discussion going forward within the industry, how we're going to be able to mine in a much more efficient manner, because just building larger tailing dams is not going to solve this problem. I think that's the core discussion going forward. So, as you remember, how many dams, where are they, what is at risk, what technologies can be additionally deployed, how are tailings liabilities factors into corporate reporting, addressing the most high-risk facilities legacy, mine of the future without reducing. This was what we set up as our key topics a year and a half ago. We did the first intervention together with ICMM, public call for a new global standard, and it has been excellently presented by Aidan. Very pleased with this. I think it has been a very good progress. It's the process. It's taken quite some time to produce this. That's the case. It's been worthwhile. And as you know, I mean, the council and the investors, we have about $14 trillion behind this initiative. We are invested in all kind of industries all over the world, all kind of issues you can imagine and some you can't imagine. I think for us, it's been a hugely rewarding process to understand how we build these kind of global standards and in what sort of collaborations we've done that. And it's been great to work with ICMM. I'm really pleased with Aidan and Tom, the work and the group at ICMM. But also UNEP has been very supportive, and it's been a very productive process. Very pleased with the outcome of this. Obviously, now it's time to implement that, and we're going to listen to Boliden on that in the next step. Secondly, as many of you on this call are aware of, we went out for the disclosure request asking about 700 companies, globally listed companies, to disclose their pretty thorough list of information regarding the tailings dams. To Aidan's point, the investment community were not happy with the initial findings that they couldn't find information about tailings, and therefore this call. We produced the database together with Grid Arendal. I hope you've had a look at this database. We're quite pleased with that. It's a first step. It's by no means the end of the road. It's only the beginning of the road on global transparency on this topic. As part of the standard and as part of the process, we'll continue this discussion going forward. If you haven't had a look, please go into tailing.grid.no. Plenty of interesting information available, and thank you for all the mining companies, especially my Swedish friends on the calls, who've disclosed into this system. Here we go. So, of the 723 companies contacted, we've had 339 responses. I think most importantly, 45 out of the top 50 largest mining companies in the world has responded. We have about 86% of the industry by market cap has responded. And 66% of the industry has fully and publicly disclosed. A number of companies are working on the response. We're waiting for that. Really pleased to see that 23 out of 23 ICMM members, the publicly listed members, have disclosed. But I'm also going to give some special praise to LKAB if you're listening in. It's the only non-listed company that has responded voluntarily to the database. And I think it sets the bar for non-listed companies to join this call for transparency on this issue. I know there's a lot of bondholders within our initiative that are quite keen to get other companies to respond as well. So watch that space, and obviously we'd like to see the non-listed participants within ICMM to respond as well, showcasing leadership. So what are we up to? Well, to give you an idea of what we're looking at right now, obviously we're very pleased with the first global industry standard in place. We've got the independent global database up and running, but we have quite a few work streams that are still up and running, very much aligned with the insurance industry and with the banking industry as well. And to be fair and honest, we're not going to let this one slip away this time. We've only started, and there's plenty of work to be done on this topic. The agenda for 2021 going forward, and as we're discussing right now, is, as was part of the recommendation by the independent chair and the independent experts, is to establish an independent international entity to oversee the global implementation of the tailing standard. Our plan to have this entity up and running at the close of 2021. We're working closely with mining companies, but also with UNEP to set this up. We want an independent verification procedure of the implementation of the standard. We think this is key, and especially from the investment industry, from the banking industry, and I dare say from the insurance industry, which are quite keen on this. This is going to be really important. So watch that space. We also see it'd be good to merge the standard and the global data portals that we've produced, so we get efficiency into this system on reporting and transparency in accordance with the standard that we've produced. We will also obviously be evaluating outcome and practical tools. I think the leadership that ICMM is setting up on this and the transparency where they produce practical tools and guidance how to implement these kind of standards are really important, especially for smaller mining companies that don't have the resources that the large companies within ICMM have. That's really important for us to see that, so we can get sort of systems efficiency and scale of economy on the implementation of this. That's a key thing going forward. We're updating the database structure for next year, and we're preparing a second round of disclosure requests based on the outcomes of the implementation of the standard. We're planning for it to be a feed-in structure so companies can feed in their own data and be responsible for the ownership of their own data. We're also working quite extensively on one global 24/7 alert system for all tailing dams in the world. That's not unrealistic, we think. On the contrary, I think there's a huge opportunity based on scale of economies and the focus that is still on tailings dams. Finally, we are looking for a mechanism to remove the most dangerous tailing dams that are now being clearly identified all around the world. Yeah, that's about my plan and our plan right now. So am I happy? Yeah, I'm happy. I think we're moving along very nicely, but we have plenty of work ahead of us.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much. And I'm glad you are happy. But that list of things to do on your to-do list, that's a long list, and it's a lot of work ahead of the global community, I'd say. Anyway, I'm sure the ICMM wants to comment on this, but we're running a bit late, so Aidan, Davy, I will leave your comments. You will have an opportunity to comment during the panel discussion at the end. So I just want to remind you guys that if you have any thoughts or questions that you want to send to the speakers, please use the menti.com platform. And you type in the code, I don't know if you can see it here on the screen, 2461790, 2461790. This new standard is covering the importance of organizational management and responsibility. That is equally important as fulfilling technical requirements. Therefore, we are very excited to learn how the world's third largest mining company, Rio Tinto, acts on these matters. So, from a sunny Stockholm morning to the dark Canadian night, please welcome Imran Jilani from Rio Tinto.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me, Emma?
Loud and clear. We can hear you and we see you.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen now, and then hopefully we can carry on. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, looking good.
Perfect.
Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Emma. And thank you, John. That was excellent. I mean, we hear you loud and clear. And I think the whole mining industry hears you got loud and clear on that. Look, the topic of my 10 or 14 minute presentation today is how Rio Tinto is set up to manage its tailings safely and responsibly. So this is a presentation mostly I prepared for Ottawa last year, but I'm going to give it over here, present it again over here. First of all, before we started on this journey, Rio Tinto back in 2014, this is before actually Mount Poly failure occurred in Bernardino and obviously Samarco. We went into a thorough exercise of what we have learned from the failures that had occurred in the past, obviously. And this is a simple summary of those seven or so bullet points that we came up with. And then these bullet points, basically, then we took forward in our developing our internal standard for Rio Tinto tailings management. Good planning is on the number one. That obviously is extremely important, as you can imagine, that this covers all areas of locating a tailing facility, making sure we are not locating it in an area where there is a population downstairs that we can't manage, or also in the planning, making sure that we are adopting a technology that will reduce the volume of tailings. And this is, John stressed upon that in one of his slides, that this is extremely important. Once we are locked into, a mining company gets locked into a plan or a pre-feasibility, it becomes very difficult to change. So that's where we are stressing heavily on planning. Then the list goes on. Designs must be reviewed by independent, that's again, Aidan touched upon that. Independent reviews are extremely important. So nothing is surprising in this list that we compiled back in 2014, basically, of items. And all of these items then basically form the basis for our standard. I just want to touch upon this management of change that is on the last bullet, which is in red, is extremely important, as you would accept. The fundamental problem behind these failures, there are other technical issues obviously there, but the fundamental problem is poor management of change. Things are sometimes changed during construction, operation, or design or whatever, and there is not a proper understanding of the impact of that change. So this is an area where it's very dear to my heart. If you ask me, this is where I basically live and breathe. And this is something that we have stressed very heavily in our standard as well. This is what you can see is a typical 3 levels of assurance that Rio Tinto uses for its risk management, not just tailings, but generally for its risk management. It's similar to any other large corporation. For Rio Tinto, the first level is basically what happens on the site level. On the site level, we employ good people who can actually manage the facility. We employ good designers. We do inspections, monitoring. All those activities that are done at the site level is at the green base. Then above that, Rio Tinto has a very strong second level of assurance. And this is where Rio Tinto takes pride that this is one of the strongest second level of assurance that we have. And over here, we got several pieces over here. One is these reviews that are done by internal specialists, people like me on the call, and external people that we bring in. We bring them independently and we ask them to do review. And these are more strategic reviews, basically. What is happening down the road in 5 years, 10 years, whatever, so that we are not blindsided by something as of today. We should be prepared. And tailing dams are notorious. If you don't plan properly, something will go wrong. Then there is a whole piece that is called BCA on this, which is business conformance audits. So these are again audits which are separate from reviews. Audits are basically against the standards that Rio Tinto has. And these audits are done again by people who are independent of site operations. And Rio Tinto has these standards, and tailing standard is one of them. So there is a clear separation between the green and the blue for the second level. Then we move on to the top. We don't stop at that level. At the board level, we have another system of assurance, which is the third level. And this is where we invite external partners and business consultants like KPMG or Ernst & Young, and then they engage an external specialist, and they go around checking on the health of the systems. So basically, they are looking for any shortfalls in our systems where things can go wrong, and they come back and advise us completely separately from our operations and second level. So pretty strong. And underneath here is the D5 standard, which we call as the tailing standard of Rio Tinto, that underpins this entire 3 levels of assurance. I'm not going to spend time on this one, how audits improve operation, that's something, but I'm going to move to the next slide. Rio Tinto's management standard is called D5 standard. We started working on this in 2014, before Mount Poly. And I'm very proud to say that this standard has basically stood up to the tests that have gone through after, obviously including the ICMM and the global standard also. It's a mandatory standard. It's not an optional. Every operation in Rio Tinto, every tailing facility is mandated to abide by and conform with this standard. It covers all life cycle development phases, not just operations or anything. It covers everything from planning, design, all through to closure. The standard is not entirely a technical standard. It is basically a management standard where we basically make sure we have enough controls in place for our internal governance. So we have clear accountabilities assigned over here on a corporate level. The organization of the standard is again very typical, and just like MAC or CDA or ENCODE or any other standard that you have seen. It starts from planning, I again stress upon that, gets into implementation, gets into review, and if whatever is found in the review, you go back to the drawing board of planning and you start again. So that's how typically it's workable. It's auditable. This is not just a document that is given to the site and then we expect them to abide by it. No, we go out there as a second level of assurance and it's auditable. There's a whole audit that happens and the deficiencies in non-conformance are reported and then actions are developed to track them over the next weeks or months or whatever to make sure that the things are taken care properly. The highlights of the standard, this is just a very brief summary over here. I'm conscious of time. Clear accountabilities. This is Aidan stressed upon that. The global standard also is talking about it very, very strongly. We do accountability. There are defined roles. Good documentation. This is another area where we have seen in mining industry things fall down, is that many good facilities do not have proper documentation behind them. If you go and ask them, well, yes, we did it this way and it's in someone's head and blah, blah, blah. But we stress upon making sure documentation exists, which includes obviously the manuals and the design reports, etc. Design engineer is basically a focal point, and we make sure that the design engineer is kept engaged during different stages of the operation. We do not just engage design engineer and then say goodbye after doing the design and we'll see you after 5 years. That is obviously an area where things fall down. We do not do that. And then obviously the list goes on. Management of change, I stressed upon earlier, very important, and heavy focus on monitoring and design verification. Now this is an area we do not, in our standard, we do not use the term, the performance-based approach that Professor Morgenstern now has and ICMM has adopted, but in essence, we capture the spirit. We have been doing it since 2014, same thing that is now performance-based, but we are calling it different, but in essence, we are exactly following the same principles over here. Next slide, now I get into where do we stand with ICMM. I don't need to tell you ICMM, Aidan has already covered. You know, they released this position statement back in 2016 that many of you have seen. And keep in mind, our standard was in 2014. Key recognition, we keep them there. The tailings production is inherent, but the important is that owners are accountable. If you see on my red text, owners are accountable, no matter what. The accountability sits with the mining company, period. I mean, there is no other excuse around it that you designed that this and that. Science and expertise for preventing TSF failures is there. We are not short of this technology. 6 elements that ICMM basically developed are all incorporated into our D5 standard. And I'm not going to go through all these 6 elements. You can read them with the ICMM document, but all of them are encountered in our D5 standard, which makes me very proud since we wrote the standard before these 6 elements were developed. Look, this is a slide that I like personally quite well. This is towards the end of my presentation. And I use it as a simple slide to communicate to our senior management. This is an area where Rio Tinto and I personally would like to stress that we do a lot of good work. Many mining companies do a lot of good work, but if you cannot communicate that good work in a simple way, effective way to the senior management, which is sitting above us, people who are making decisions, multi-million, multi-billion dollar, then we have failed in our task. People like me have failed. And sometimes I have to recognize this does happen. So what this slide basically is to explain that the safe tailings management is a 3-legged stool. It is not a very complicated process. It's a 3-legged stool based on design, construction, and operation. And if a weakness develops in any one of these legs, the stool will fall down. So we can't just say we are doing an excellent job in construction or operation and the design is poor. The stool is going to fall down. Okay, so we make sure this balance of expertise and balance of focus is maintained. And this is a slide that I use for our senior management. There are many times excellent designs prepared by excellent engineers are absolutely undermined during construction or during operation. And look, we are going to be transparent. It has happened in many places. It may have happened in Rio, but we are recognizing that flaw and we are there to make sure it does not happen with our D5 standard. So this is basically gist of my presentation. I'm cognizant of time. I've taken 12 minutes. I was given 13 or 14. So basically, I'm ready for any questions down whenever the time is there. But thank you very much for this opportunity to let me talk. Back to you, Emma.
Thank you, Imran. Thank you very much. I found it very interesting that you, even though the construction of your management system is simple and clear, you said it's three-legged stool. Would you say that your approach is scalable for smaller mining companies?
Absolutely, Emma. Absolutely. It is a risk-based approach. Okay, we basically prioritize. We do not go into each and every, because that is another area where things do not work. Is if you ask small operators to, you burden them with everything. We are getting into a step-by-step approach, and then we basically build it from bottom up within Rio Tinto, and it can be scaled outside as well.
But the resources within a mining company compared, Rio Tinto compared to a much smaller company, do you have any piece of advice to give them to sort of scale down your structure and make it work in a smaller mining company?
Look, we have got joint ventures in some places where the resources are limited. This is not, and these operations are cash strapped sometimes. The message, the advice we give is focus on the key fundamental controls. And we have a bow tie of critical controls. I don't have it in my presentation here, but a bow tie of critical controls. So if we focus on a handful of 5 or 6 critical controls, we can manage the basic risk quite effectively, and then you can build upon that as time goes by.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you once again, Imran, and thank you for getting up in the middle of the night to give this excellent presentation for us. You can now go back to sleep for a while before I call you back for the final panel discussion.
No, I'll be here, no problem. Thank you.
For the rest of us, it's time not to go to bed, but it's time to get up and do some shaking again. So I say, Moa Veile, please, welcome back.
Thank you, Emma. All right, I would like you all to stand up, grasp this opportunity and get moving a bit. I want you to stand up, as I said, and put your feet shoulder width apart. Make sure you distribute your weight evenly on both feet and then tie a foot. Put your hands alongside your sides. We're going to start with the legs, and I want you to look over one shoulder as far as you possibly can. Come back to the middle and the other side, as far as you possibly can. Once more each side. So you turn your head over one shoulder, look over it, and the other side. All right, we'll stop with the head in the middle, so look straight ahead of you. We're going to bend to the side, try to reach your knee joint, and come up again, other side. Make sure you actually bend to the side and not slightly forward. And come up again. We're going to increase this slightly, so you're going to push your hip out to the side while you're turning, turning to the side. And then the other side. Push your hip out. All right, once more, a little bit faster this time, is to make sure we got the movement. All right, stop in the middle. I want you to work on your double chin, so push it in as much as you can, and we roll the shoulders back. And stop with your shoulders right in the back as far as you possibly can, and you bend backwards. Keep looking forward. Come up again. We roll them shoulders forward now. And we bend forward. Keep looking straight ahead. I want you to move your hands below your knees and up again to your thighs. Again, below the knees. Feel the stretch on the back of your legs and up. Once more, you know this now. Roll them back. Working your double chin and bend backwards. Come up again and roll those shoulders forward and bend forward. Move the hands below the knees. Up on the thighs again, below the knees and up on the thighs. Stand up. Hands along the sides, body upright, and we push the arms back. Straight arms, really work those shoulders. And we do the complete opposite, above the head and behind the head. Once more, all the way back, keep that body upright. Ooh, it's hard. And up behind the head. All right, keep those arms up here. Make yourself as tall as you possibly can. Even come up on your tiptoes and stretch a little bit more, a little bit taller. And relax. Shake them arms out, shake them legs out. Thank you very much for participating. Over to Emma yet again.
Thank you, Moa. Excellent. And I could see you speakers on our Zoom. When I can see all you speakers, excellent performance. Thank you, guys. We just heard Imran Jilani from the Rio Tinto, their approach on tailings management and governance. He also gave this short piece of advice to smaller mining company. So our next speaker, Hans Häggström from Boliden, what do you say? What are your comments? Okay. Is he here? Is he online? Are you online, Hans? Yeah, it's coming. The studio room. They're talking. Something's mysterious is happening.
Can you see my screen and can you hear my voice?
I can hear your voice. Do we see his screen? Okay.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Hans.
Thank you.
So what are your thoughts on so just start by asking you again, what are your thoughts on the piece of advice that Imran Jilani of Rio Tinto just gave you? It's scalable. Do you agree?
Yes, absolutely. It's scalable and it's good inspiration for our work also. And I can see that we are doing a lot of the same work that Rio Tinto is doing according to. We have a guideline and we are working with a tailings management system and so on. So I think we are on a good way, even if we are a smaller company.
Okay. I leave the floor to you now, Hans.
Pieces in place. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank Aidan, John and Imran for a good presentation and also Mua for this good exercise. It feels great to get some new air and blood into your body, more or less. So I will start this presentation to do say hello. And I'm a dam safety development engineer at the HRNS department at Boliden's mine environmental staff. And I want to start to thank Svemin for this opportunity to hold this presentation so we can share our work that we have done so far and our experience regarding the implementation of the new global tailings standard. And from my perspective, the standard have a wider scope than we typically associate with tailings management and dam safety. And I believe that the standard will increase the perspective in density. And that will give us a lot of opportunity to come up with the best sustainable solution for the tailings management. So I will change my... So this is the content. I will have a short introduction. And after that, I will have our implementation process plan that are divided into 4 different phases and what we have done so far and our planned future work. So, at Boliden we have an environmental policy that at least content this, that we shall commit to responsible waste and dam safety management to protect health and safety and to minimize on environment. And for support that we have a tailings management system that is an integrated part of the Boliden management system. And to support our operations to fulfill this, we have an internal guideline for dam safety. So this is the system we have right now and how we have been working with it. And here you also can see a table of the amount of extractive waste that we produced for the last 3 years. And as you can see, as also John mentioned, that the waste production is increased. And this is also, and you see that the last year we produced more than 50 million tonnage of tailings that we have to deposit in a tailings storage facility. And in the map to the right, you can see where we have our tailings storage facility that we're depositing in today. And this is also why tailings management is so important for Boliden, that we produce this much of it. So, and this is our implementation process plan, and we have divided it into 4 phases. And when we talk about this plan, you can also see that Boliden is committed to the global tailings standard. And I will now try to explain the different phases. And as here you also can see the timeline for our planned implementation. So we have started with this initial assessment, and this is also where we are right now, even if we have come a little bit further. And even if this implementation process plan is presented as a straight line, the phases are parallel in many ways. But the initial assessment, the first phase of the implementation process, is about carefully assessing whether the new global tailing standards meets a real need and wherever it fits in the organization. In this phase is also assessed wherever the standard is needed and where we can adapt it to fit into the organization. And also to get a common understanding by information and education, to get a common acceptance for the standard inside of the organization and the whole company. And the next phase is structure for implementation, is about developing a structure for the implementation of the standard. So before the end of phase 2, there should be a clear plan of what should happen and when. It should also be clear who is responsible for different parts of the implementation process. And to get the right input for this, we have done or planning to do some gap analysis and also some bench learning and benchmarking, so we can use the whole industry knowledge and how they are working with this, so we can help out each other. And then we come into the implementation, and this is where the real implementation is happening. So structure and support for the work are an important part for this phase. So phase 3 includes the following components: practical and technical support to the implementers. That will say an improved tailings management system with guideline and instruction. And also evaluation of the implementation process and feedback to the all involved. And then we have the fourth and the last phase, learn and improve. And this is, as it sounds like, about learning from experience and reviewing both internal and external, how well we meet the standard, and continuous work with our continuous improvement. So this is our implementation plan. And what have we done so far? We have started with this information and education to get the common understanding for the standard. We have had internal meetings and also workshops to discuss the standard, and in different level in the organization. We have had with the personnel that works the day-to-day at the TSF, and also with the people that are responsible for the dam safety. And then we also have done, or we will continue with this work also. We have an annual tailings management conference in the beginning of November, and this will be, of course, a topic for that event. And we also will have a workshop for the upper management inside of Boliden Mines to discuss this standard even more. And we have performed a high-level gap analysis on principal level, and we have presented also for the dam safety responsible. And we have pointed out at least 3 topics or 3 areas that we consider a demand of a larger workload to say that we are sure to be in line with the standard. And that is governance, a systematic way of work regarding instruction and documentation, organization, that roles and responsibility and accountability have to be a little bit clearer and a better understanding for it, and also the resources for it. And also, as always, we have to increase the knowledge base and also to document it even better. So, but I would say in general, from the gap analysis, we do a lot of the requirements, and that's also a part of our current legislation and in our industrial standard. So what's our further work? It's to get a good project team for this implementation, and I will also take this opportunity to reach out for a project leader, So if you think you are, or that you know the right person, don't hesitate to contact us and say who can be this project leader. So now we are planning also to see and to set up this project, and we are planning to divide this project into 2 different projects. That one is on a more higher level, that will be the requirements that will go out to the whole Boliden group and can be managed for that. And then we have another project group that will be more on operational level. So that's where we are. Then we will use the gap analysis to the input for the implementation, so we know what type of instruction and how we have to, even if our tailings management is good today, but I will believe that nothing is that good that it can't be better. And in the end, we also worked at all the site-specific OMS manual will be updated, so we, in the end of learn and improve, we are in line with the standard. So that was all for me. So thank you very much for taking your time.
Thank you very much, Hans. Thank you for an interesting presentation. I was curious, if it hadn't been for this global tailing standard, had you been implementing or taking those measures anyway?
I would say we started a TSF project back in some years ago, that we have seen that this is some of the things we need to be even better on. So we have a project back then started, and that we see that this is the same question that we find out then, but now we have to give it a little bit more resources and get it done, I would say.
Talking about resources, the implementing these kind of, thorough standard, it isn't for free, Is it very costly?
That's a good question. I'll say both yes and no. This depends on what you compare with. If something will go wrong, then it's very cheap to implement the standard if something will go wrong and we have a dam failure, for example.
Okay, needs to be done anyway. Thank you very much, Hans. I will now invite all speakers back for the closing panel discussion. So do we have everyone online? Yes, thank you. First, I would like to ask Imran from Rio Tinto. Are you happy with how this new standard came out?
Yes, we are quite happy, and we were actually involved in the advising also on the sidelines. We were supporting it through ICMM and other avenues. It is very much aligned with our internal D5 standard, like I said earlier. So for us, it is not a surprise or anything new. It does bring in formality. It does bring in the social aspects that we were missing earlier. So we totally are happy with it.
But and another question for Aidan, or maybe for John too. Was it difficult to, or what were the most difficult parts to agree on?
Sure, well, maybe if I go first, John. Look, the truth is, I don't think I would pick upon any particular piece and say that was the most difficult part. But the thing that I think is fair to say is that when you're in a multi-stakeholder process, as we were, to try and forge a standard through consensus, invariably there were differing perspectives from whether it was from ASA, from UNEP, or from PRI on the relative importance of particular aspects of the standard. The thing I think I can say with complete confidence, though, is that by going down this multi-stakeholder route, ultimately that has strengthened the quality and the content of the final product. So in some respects, it's not about individual parts, and it's more about multi-stakeholder processes are by their nature slightly more convoluted, slightly more time-consuming, but they're worth it.
Yeah, and to Imran's point, and thank you for the presentation, both Imran and Hans. I think they complemented each other excellently. I mean, we clearly knew that there were best practice out there in the business on a global basis, and you simply need to push best practice to the forefront. And when you do that, people can recognize that this is best practice, and that's where we're starting. So I totally agree with Imran, and thank you for the excellent work from Rio in the participation of this process as well. So, and that's basically what you do when you make a standard. You get best practice clearly out there transparently for everyone to see what best practice is.
I understand that the in implementing this standard in as many mining companies or mining operation as possible, a real bottleneck could be to find enough tailings engineers or design engineers. I mean, to carry out this new standard. For Imran and Hans representing mining companies, what do you say? Is this a real, what are your thoughts on this?
No, it's a very important point, Imran, that you touched upon. Yes, there is an extreme shortage of good qualified engineers and tailings, especially the youngsters. We have not pushed this through enough in universities. We're not producing enough. And the older ones for independent reviews, for example, a very fundamental pillar is the independent review that the standard is also pushing. We only have a handful, maybe 10, 20 gray-haired senior experienced worldwide. I mean, and there are like 100 mining companies. So how are we going to use those? And then they are getting close to retirement. Some of them are 70-year-old. That is a serious issue. But anyway, mining companies are working like others. We are working with universities, and there is a need to provide scholarships and programs to bring in young people into this discipline, definitely.
Do you agree, Hans? Do you find the situation the same, this gray-haired old man?
Yes, I find the situation the same, and it's all about capacity building, and that's something we have to take a bigger responsibility in as a company, as an industry. And also we have to share best practice between each other, so we don't reinvent the wheel every time between the companies. So we should not be competitive when it comes to this. We should share with each other so we can raise the bar together for all the companies, because we are all losers if there are a damn failure.
Yeah, that's true. Another question for Aidan and John. Do you see a risk here? I mean, the larger mining companies and mining operations, they have more resources to actually hire these very afterthought design engineers and tailings engineers, but the rest, all the middle or the smaller mining companies, they might not even get a hold of these people that have this crucial role in the mining companies.
So I was actually quoted in the New York Times on this when we released the standard a few weeks ago, and I said, I think it's our belief, and I think it's excellently responded by Imran and Hans here, that we're going to build a cadre of young people coming into the industry, which I think are going to become a global sort of expert group on this topic. I think for a number of smaller mining companies, you're going to need external expertise coming in, helping them, and then moving to the next mine. And in that way, we're going to secure sort of a global implementation of the standard and a streamline of best practice. It's obviously going to take time, but we've been mining for a very long time and we'll continue to mine for a very long time. So time we have on our side. We need that cooperation that Imran and Hans is alluding to. And as I said in my presentation, I think the ICMM is an excellent vehicle to collect that best practice and to spread best practice into the mining industry. So we're counting on Aidan and his co-workers at ICMM to do that.
Yeah.
But just maybe building on John's point, I think, firstly, perhaps more so than at any point in the history of mining, we now have a clear kind of pathway to a very viable and rewarding career for young professionals coming into the industry in the practice of tailings management. That was not the case historically. So I think the standard will help to elevate the profile and the importance of tailings management, and will signal this is a this is an opportunity space for young professionals. I also think, to John's point, when this area of best practice is so important and good practice. We're in the process of putting together a good practice guide for tailings management. We're also in the process of putting together a conformance protocol to support our members in the short term with implementation of the global standard, because they've committed to an ambitious timeline. Those resources are needed almost now, but they're not just going to be available to members. Those resources will be widely available and disseminated to the entire industry. And that will also be a help to companies that are looking to implement with their own internal resources.
I'll then stay with you, Aidin, for a while. I had to interrupt you earlier when you asked for comments on John's presentation. Do you want to add something to what John said early on in this session?
No, I guess, just to emphasize that I think we all have kind of respective roles to play. And I think, John's mentioned the work that's underway to try and move to establish an independent entity. I think it's important and right that that's done through PRI and UNEP, and we look forward to engaging in discussions at an appropriate juncture with them on this. I think maybe the one thing I would add, though, is that given that, and as Hans pointed out, companies need to move on this quickly. And at the point of launch, our membership committed to implementing the standard fully for extreme and high-risk facilities within 3 years and all other facilities within 5 years. And that's why we're working hard to put together the resources that will support them on that journey. And those resources, as I say, will be available more broadly beyond the industry. Just on the point of a conformance protocol, it's critical, I think, that people have something in hand that enables them to begin to, probably in the first instance, to self-assess against how are we progressing in terms of implementation, and then ultimately to bring in external resources when it comes to the conduct of third-party assessments on implementation. And that work, as I say, it's important, it's pressing, it's imperative. We have it soon. We aim to have it by no later than early the beginning of next year. But we also see that as a potential contribution to this independent entity. They won't be starting from ground zero when it comes to looking to develop something like this, and hopefully it will be largely fit for purpose.
Thank you. I would just for a moment we take a step back and sort of define what is dam safety. How much is dam safety a technical issue, and how much is it a management issue? Imran, you touched upon that in the end of your presentation. Do you, Hans from Boliden, do you agree? Or what do you say? Is it rather a technical issue, or is it a management issue?
I think it all sticks together.
I'm impressed with your understanding. You're touching upon the key points. Very, very, very impressed. I mean, in the beginning, I thought it was a technical issue, but as you progress and you see things, you very quickly realize it is a management issue as well. And that is what I said in my last slide. If we technical people are not able to communicate to our senior management, we have failed. And that applies to dam safety as well.
Yeah, what do you say, Hans? Do you agree on that? Or how would you, is it rather the one way or the other?
I would say it's all stick together, but it's all about also culture, how we see on our waste. Is it only waste, or is it something that we need in our value chain to do our production of concentrate?
Yeah,
so
is it waste or a resource, potential resource? Yeah. I think we touched upon that a lot last year at the Swedish Environmental Conference, waste versus potential resource. Just like yesterday during our sessions, I have a sidekick today, and it's my colleague Linus Ljungström, and he is the one mastering and working on the income of all the questions that you have asked or posed. So he will now. Linus, do we have any questions?
Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, perfect. We do have some questions from the audience, and let's see. The first one is for Aidin and or John. And it is in the global standard, the consequence classes with the loss of over 1,000 lives is equal to the loss of 5,000 jobs. How was the discussion behind that, since the safety net for unemployment vary globally? So John or Aidan, do you have any thoughts on that? Or thoughts or comments?
I think my observation would be that we are not looking to equate those as somehow equivalent. These are attributes that apply to the various consequence levels as laid out in the tabular summary at the back of the standard. And the suggestion is not that these are somehow equivalent, but it is simply to try and provide some form of differentiation between, in the unlikely event of failure, what are the consequences, both in terms of human life, but also the economic consequences in terms of, loss of livelihoods and indeed impact on the environment as well. So I would say, please don't interpret that table as somehow suggesting that these things are equivalent, or indeed that there are trade-offs between them, because that's absolutely not the intent.
All right, thank you. And another question here is for also, I would say, Aidan and or John maybe. What are your views on the deep sea water tailings in Indonesia at, for instance, the Grasberg mine? What would the alternative be?
So this is John. As you might be aware, Freeport-McMoRan is a recommended exclusion by the council due to the Grasberg mine, and from our perspective, we've asked companies, and that's riverine tailings, just to clarify, that any company that utilizes riverine tailings in Indonesia need to sign a public policy where they disclaim using that technology for future projects. We're going to do exactly a similar thing on deep sea tailings as we speak, because obviously due to this coming out now, the standard coming out, and we see increased focus on the nickel mines in Indonesia, where you see usage of deep sea tailings as well, which is totally unacceptable, which is not the purpose of this standard. The purpose is to try to mine less and waste and get more clearly defined minerals out of the mining process. Dry stacking is a good technology. Obviously, it's difficult discussions in some places. The Grasberg mine is a very complicated project, but we need to be clear on the alternatives here.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. And over to Emma.
Thank you. Thank you, Linus. I have another question. I guess ICMM represents is it 27 mining companies? How do we really include all the other 1,000 plus mining companies out there in implementing this standard?
So I'll take the opportunity to respond. We have a really good dialogue with about 400 listed mining companies as of right now. They've responded really well to our questionnaire. That was the purpose of the questionnaire, was to set up that network of mining companies. And we'll be pushing, and I think this has been a really great discussion. We'll be pushing for transparency from the leaders like Bolid and Rio here, showcasing leadership, picking up best practice, and trying to establish a wider platform than the ICMM. And I know from discussions with Aidan and Tom that ICMM is completely okay with that. We need to build a stronger relationship within the mining industry. We're not going to be, it's going to be the weakest link within the mining industry. That's going to be our concern, and we need to strengthen that one. And I'm really encouraged by the response from the whole mining industry on this topic. So I think there's a fundamental change here right now that we're going to run with. That's the purpose of the agenda, and quite still a very ambitious agenda, to be honest. But otherwise, I think we risk not using the momentum we have right now, and that would be really stupid, quite honestly.
I think maybe just to add to John's point, so as you say, we're 27 member companies, and so that's a small drop in the bucket in terms of the total number of mining companies. But I think that the power of the co-convened model here is critically important, because it's the signal effect coming from a group of leading companies that this is of profound importance to them. It's also then, I think, the signal effect of investors increasingly requiring adherence to the standard as a condition of investment. that I expect to see following through. And indeed, the participation of UNEP is incredibly important in supporting governments that wish to incorporate and build upon the standard into their kind of national or state legislation and policies. And so this is very much about that collaborative endeavor by the co-conveners in the first instance, but I think we're also starting to see interest from banks, insurers, and others to hardwire adherence to the global standard into their conditions of providing either investment, finance, or insurance. And that, I think, is what will ultimately take us to scale in terms of broad-based uptake and implementation.
Thank you, Aidan. Do you want to have something to add? Hans, representing one of these smaller, you're representing one of the biggest companies here in Sweden, mining companies, but being one of the smaller mining companies on the global scene. How would you say we get all these other smaller mining companies involved in applying and implementing this new standard on tailings management and tailings standard?
I'll say, as ICMM also said, that we have to be high transparency and share our experience with each other, so we can use how the other companies have done and how we are doing it. I would say that how we come together in this.
Just acting as a role model, you mean?
Yeah, I would say that.
So just a question maybe to all of you. Have we seen the last tailing failure now?
No, unfortunately, post Brumadinho, we've had a number of smaller tailings failures around the world. And to be fairly honest, the investment community are really concerned that we do have high risk dams that risk failing. So we're asking all the mining companies that we're engaged with to really start implementing this standard and to really take a third and a fourth and a fifth look at their current tailing dams. I think Imran's presentations was excellent. There is a concern that you change the course over the history of the mine, of the tailings structure, and you change the original plan. I think we're still concerned that there are a number of old dams where this has happened, and we need to work much more intensively on those dams.
Yeah.
So, please, Aidan, go ahead.
No, just to say, look, the launch of the standard, it's not the end point, it's the beginning in many respects of the hard work that needs to happen around implementation. I would hope that with effective implementation of the standard, that should ensure that facilities that adopt and embrace that approach and implement fully, that we would not see failures within those facilities. But equally, to John's point, ultimately what will protect against that is broad-based uptake, effective implementation, and indeed addressing some of those more troubled assets where ultimately there may be ongoing residual risks beyond anything that can be done in the short to medium term.
Yeah, and I think I just want to comment on something that I think it was John who said earlier, that we should mine, you said something like we should mine smarter. We need to mine smarter. And of course, I guess that's what all mining companies are striving for. We don't want to extract anything that is not possible to sell. So I think all mining companies are working hard to create as little waste or tailings as possible. Anyway, I think, do we have another question, Linus?
We do.
Over to you.
We have a viewer question here, and I guess it's an open question for the panel. How should we deal with companies that don't take this issue seriously? Should we be some kind of police, or how should we deal with these companies? Maybe Aidan?
I think to Aidan's point, and this is what we're really happy with, we're having great discussions with the insurance industry, with the banking industry. I think, quite honestly, I think this is an unprecedented opportunity for the whole mining industry to start cooperating. To your point, Emma, as well, I think we need to cooperate on smarter technology and how to become a better mining company. I think we can cooperate quite a lot on that. But I do think if you don't become a responsible mining company today and you don't take this seriously, you're going to have a really hard time finding finance. We're seeing that in so many other industries. And that's the key driver for becoming a responsible company is access to capital, which is a key thing if you're going to survive. So watch that space, I would say.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Back to Emma.
Yeah, okay. Do we have any final comments from you guys before we wrap this session up?
I'd like to make a comment. I was just sitting and just a thought came to my mind. One is the smaller mining companies. My suggestion is reach out to the larger companies like BHPs and Rios and ask for technical advice. Mining companies, generally there's a perception that we are very cagey, we don't talk to other competitors. That is true, we don't want to talk about commercials and other things, but on the technical side, there is opportunity that if you reach out to the proper channel, maybe through ICMM or some other bodies, you can get help from on the technical side, because we all recognize we're only as good as the weakest link. If BHP and Rio are the safest mining companies and there's a small one that does irresponsible, the next failure is coming on the statistics. It's not Imran talking about, it's the statistics. They don't lie. So when that happens, the investors are going to get very angry and they're going to paint everyone with the same brush. So I think it's in the interest, and maybe this is not Rio Tinto talking, this is Imran talking now, I'm not talking to Rio Tinto, but there could be a mentorship program could be considered. A mentorship by large mining companies, they take 2 or 3 small mining companies or 5 of them under their wings and try to mentor them technically. Not commercially, nothing of that business side, but mentor them technically so that this program can come from the CEOs down. So this is something where John and Aidan can work, but this is just Imran talking, not Rio Tinto.
Okay, mentoring program, interesting. Do you have any other final comments?
I think that was excellent, Imran. That's an excellent ending point. I think cooperation is the key going forward. So much impressed by that. And then I think Aidan and the other co-conveners will continue on that line of work, definitely. Thank you all.
This may be one final comment from me, and it's very much consistent with the discussion we're having here through Svemin. We, in addition to our 27 member companies, we have 37 association members, and that gives us reach to almost another 1,500 companies. And so we look to work through those to disseminate both the standard, but also the supporting documentation that we're producing. And so that's a really valuable opportunity as well to reach a much broader set of companies than we do just directly through our company members.
Thank you, Aidan. Thank you. Hans, do you have any final remarks?
Not really, just to keep up the good work as we have started and try to see how we can help each other out in the best way. And it would be really interesting to continue this work that we have started.
That's good final words, I believe. So thank you very much, all speakers of this session. Thank you very much. And thank you all viewers and contributors to this session. The next session and the last session for this year's environmental conference will be on certification and traceability, and that will start at 11 o'clock, so in 30 minutes. So now get a good leg stretch and some shoulder rolling, and the next session will be hosted by the Svemin CEO, Maria Suner Fleming. So I say goodbye from Stockholm and see you next year maybe. Bye-bye. vad heter det?
I will Swedish.
Welcome back to the fifth session of the Svemin Environmental Conference for the 2020 version. My name is Maria Suner Fleming and I'm the CEO of Svemin, and I'm going to be the moderator for this final session instead of Emma this time. And the theme of this session is certification and traceability. That is a very important key piece for how we could achieve a sustainable supply of materials and especially metals in the future. And there are a lot of interesting things going on in this area right now, even though there are not any existing functioning systems in place yet. But we believe firmly from Svemin that this is something that will come for the metal sector. And to start with, we actually have two Menti questions for the audience that I would like to highlight. You see the Menti number here, and you could already now go in and vote for these two questions, and we will look at the results a little bit later. But first, I would like to invite Erik Lindblom, who is a project leader for TraceMet, which is a Svemin project. And he works at the Swedish Environmental Research Institute. So, over to Erik.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, I'm glad to be part of this conference. I think you put together a great program, great list of speakers. Proud and humble to be part of that. TraceMet, as you mentioned, is a project initiated by Svemin. It's one of the Swedish Mining Innovation's strategic projects running, well, it started just before December last year and will end January next year. So a 14-month long project. And it's all about tracing environmental performance of steel and copper through the value chains. And starting with the question, why would we do that? You already touched upon that, Maria, and it was, I think, very comprehensively and convincingly explained during the two first sessions yesterday. So this will be a very, very brief recap. We have the mega trends, so to say, with the increasing global population, increasing urbanization, and increasing living standards. on the one hand. On the other hand, there is the ongoing climate and biodiversity crisis, where every bit of warming matters, especially since warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius or higher increases the risk associated with long-lasting or irreversible changes, such as the loss of some ecosystems. And the nature is declining globally at rates unprecedented in human history, and the rate of species extinctions is accelerating. So these are, of course, quite literally matters of life and death. And if we are to achieve this transformation on a global level, we need to balance these two aspects. There is undeniably an increasing demand for metals and minerals. And on the other hand, there is an urgent need for sustainable supply chains. And the possibility to trace the environmental performance through the value chains is, in our meaning, one of part of the solution, not the solution, but part of the solution. And we also think that that this will be primarily market-driven, that proactive and responsible actors should have competitive advantage if the buyers are able to convince themselves, get the information they need, regardless if it's a bus or it's a building element required for this sustainable society transformation, to convince themselves that the raw materials and the processes, refining processes, are sustainable. That will make it possible for them to actually balance these different two needs to the benefit of the upstream actors that behave in a sustainable way. And I'm really looking forward to the following presentations. I hope that you will touch upon this if you see it as will the carrot or the stick be the most important driving force for traceability and certification, since that is not our main focus in the TraceMet project. So who are we taking on this challenge? I mentioned Svemin and IVL already. Together with RISE, we formed the working group of the project. And just as important are our industry partners, ABB, Boliden, Elektrokoppar, LKAB, Scania, SSAB, and Volvo Group, who form the user group. All project partners are also represented in the steering group of this project. So what have we achieved so far? Well, we have implemented a mass balance chain of custody account on a blockchain database. And we have developed project internal product category rules that enables a certified declaration for carbon footprint and recycled content of metals. So what does that mean? Well, that means that we have come across a number of specific challenges, context-specific challenges that we have had to deal with and overcome, and in the process generated some, in our mind, quite valuable knowledge going forward. And more specifically, this is a very simplified illustration of this steel and copper value chain, starting with the mines and smelters, ending with the buyers. The mass balance chain of custody approach means that we, within this system, at all time keep track of how much metal there is in the system, where, at which link of the system the metal is, and also checks that you cannot, for example, Elektrokoppar, you cannot sell more copper wire than you have bought copper cathodes. You have to respect the mass balance. If we are having different product categories or product streams. That is, for instance, it is indicated by the gray and green boxes. If you have one stream of certified metal and another stream of not certified metal, we will also keep track of the balance of those two different qualities throughout the system. All transactions are stored on a blockchain database, which means that there are multiple copies of this database. It's a distributed database, making it very, very difficult to manipulate the data. If someone were to make changes in one of the copies of the database, it wouldn't match the other copies. The mass balance approach, though, it's not the only chain of custody model you could go for. We are not keeping track of the specific copper or iron atoms through the value chain. If we had been looking at, say, conflict minerals instead, then you would probably go with another chain of custody model, keeping identity integrity or identity preservation to be able to track the specific origin. We are primarily interested in keeping track of the environmental performance through the value chain. So not only storing data on amounts, but also the environmental performance and how it is changed through the value chain, depending on the different processes and transports. Environmental performance can, of course, mean quite a number of different things in this pilot project. We are including the carbon footprint and the recycled content. And if you are more familiar with life cycle assessment and product environmental footprint methodology than I am, it will make sense if I tell you that TraceMet is, we have an attributional approach with some consequential elements. And within this product category rules and certification scheme that we are developing, it will allow for a third-party verification. I will not go deeper into the details on this in this presentation, because that is where the devil is hiding. In this process, we have certainly, as I already mentioned, came across a number of different hurdles, minor and major hurdles that the working and user group together have had to deal with. And in my mind, this is where the organization and participation of the TraceMet project really shines, because having this multi-actor cross-value chain perspectives has made it possible to not only identify these challenges hidden in the details, but also explore and overcome them. It has helped us not to rely on assumptions on what different actors need, how they think, how they prioritize, but we have actually had real user cases within the group, real users in the group explaining that to us and to each other. So how have we achieved this? Well, I've touched upon it already, but we have tried to keep TraceMet simple, real, reliable, and quick. Simple is a relative term, of course, but we are looking at two quite well-known value chains. Sweden is in a unique or rare position of actually having these two value chains within, mostly, more or less within our borders. And we have a lot of knowledge on the value chains, obviously. And the value chains are also quite short. We have 3 consecutive links from the mine to the end of the value chains. Having the industry partners within the project allows us to work with real data and real user cases, which is, of course, as I said, a great benefit to us. And we get the reality check of our development on the fly. trying to make it reliable, we are adjusting existing sustainability criteria rather than developing new criteria. In this way, it will be easier to communicate to external partners or parties of interest, and we can draw from the experience and all the work that has gone into these existing standards and so on. And trying to be quick. We have applied the agile development method, which in brief means that we have continuous evaluation where the user group is giving feedback on the prototype as it develops. There is a close vertical and lateral interaction between project partners, and by that I mean that all partners are in the working end user group as well as in the steering group. We don't run the value chains in parallel, but have all the partners in the same group exchanging information, perspectives, and suggestions for solutions. So some of the challenges and opportunities that we have identified so far. The first I would like to point to is the periodicity and reporting. It soon turns out that the different actors within these value chains, they have their specific reporting periods. It's usually a yearly reporting, but not always synchronized. And it has consequences on the database, where you want the data on the performance to follow the pace of the metal going through the value chain rather than the reporting periods. So this has required an implementation of the asynchronous reporting and computation functionality, where the database the database keeps track on when data was reported, and even if the data is yet not reported, it can be reported afterwards. Transparency and reliability. It turns out that there are conflicting interests, so to say, between the mass balance approach and business confidentiality. Keeping track of amounts sold and purchased, keeping track on who sold and who purchased, and storing this on a shared database means that anyone with access to one of the copies of the databases can do this competition analysis, which is not business information that you want to share. So the solution here is to introduce a third party or a middleman, not allowing the actual buyers and sellers access to the database. And finally, granularity of data. It connects, is linked to the other two challenges, but we can see that there is a large-scale transformation going on technically with our Internet of Things, blockchains, etc., which will make it possible to report on a much shorter frequency and with much higher granularity, but we are relying, and to some extent restricted by, existing routines and standards. So this is something that we can see on the horizon, but we're not quite there yet. So finally, any solution must meet the specific requirements of its value chains. I tried to give a few examples of this. And my take-home message to you is that it is necessary to engage all the actors along the value chains to keep development simple, real, reliable, and quick. That is the key message here. We now have 3 short months of final implementation and evaluation till we're wrapping up this project and going beyond the pilot, looking ahead. Svemin will probably have to define the minimum viable product and value proposition for market success. if Tracement is going to be taking that step, and if so, of course, we have scoped the pilot so it will be possible to explore adding other metals and or other environmental performance parameters. So I hope that you will hear a lot more about Tracement at next year's environmental conference.
Thank you.
And with that, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. And I had prepared a question for you, but unfortunately we are running short of time already, so you won't get that question. Maybe I will come back to that in the end in the panel. I just want to remind everybody that we have the 2 Menti questions. So if you go to menti.com and pin in this code that you could just note down, there are 2 questions that we will look at the results a little bit later. And now we will move on to hear more about SERA, the certification of raw materials. And the one who's going to tell you more about that is Lucas Förstler, who is business developer at SERA. So with that, over to Lucas.
Thank you very much. I hope you hear me and you see my screen.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. I will give you a quick overview about the SERA certification project. Just giving you a quick market overview and then proceed with why we are developing SERA and what is the system behind SERA, and at the end, something about the final structure of SERA. So right now we have a lot of standards, a lot of sustainability standards, which are specific for one raw material or for consumption of raw materials. Some of them are not very trustworthy because the drivers behind them, some of them are very best practice standards, which are really, really good. So we have different qualities of standards. Different actors in the supply chain follow different standards because some are using the mining standards, some are using the processing, for example, standards. Some are only using standards for their management system. So we have also a quantity and different qualities of standards. There are a lot of programs, or there are programs to harmonize and cross-recognize between all these standards, but there's still a gap and a lack of cross-recognition between the standards. And this results in the final more or less confronted situation for companies which are looking for certification. The SERA system is supported by EAT since 2017. The goal of SERA is to develop a standardized certification schemes for all raw materials around the world. Within this development, we want to ensure that environmental, social, and economic sustainability is guaranteed. And we also include traceability methods to guarantee the traceability, but I will come back to this at a later stage. SERA closed this gap, which I mentioned during the market overview, by being a holistic certification scheme. We want to apply to the entire value chain from greenfield to the consumer. We also want to apply to on a global scale, including large scale and ASM. All mining related operations, from the mining to the refining part, all sizes and all raw materials. We also want to contribute to the harmonization of the standard market, including or introducing mechanism to ensure the reliability in the chain of custody. And this is also a very important point. We want to be applicable to internal processes of organizations to reduce the efforts for certification during the audit processes. For example, if a company has already the ISO management 9001, we want to include that within our processes to reduce the efforts for certification. These are our partners, we as DMT, with mining expertise, with our sister company, the TÜV Nord certification, which is, I think, internationally known. The Montana University for analytical proof of origin methods. Confidem is our work package leader in the harmonization cross-recognition process. They have supported the development of the UNI standard, the Spanish standard. University of Leiden with expertise in chain of custody, LTU Business for market entry strategy, RISE as our expert in the development of our blockchain database hybrid application, and at least Savannah is one of our lithium pilot partner. Our advisory board consists of European Mines, the Association of Euromines, big OEMs with VW and Siemens, the financial institutes with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, as well as political institutes like the UNEC. Coming back to the SERA itself, we have 4 different standards in the system. The SERA performance standard is right now more or less available. We have revised it and it's right now in the consultation process with selected partners, selected parties and our advisory board. Currently, we are developing the chain of custody standard. So I have only rudimental information about the chain of custody standard right now. Within the next project steps, we will develop the final product standard and the SERA readiness standard. And the standard, what it means is that we have here the value chain, the process value chain. It's very rudimental from the exploration to the consumption. We have for that the output value chain from the output of the different processing steps and covering the upstream and downstream value chain. And we have the SERA performance standard for operators. That means the SERA performance standard covers the mining, processing, refining part of the value chain. And it certifies the facility or sequence of facilities of operations. And therefore it defines sustainability criteria, which every operation in the supply chain have to fulfill. And when it comes to the individual aspect, the individual conditions of raw materials, the local and regional conditions, the governmental conditions, etc., are taken into account in so-called implementation details. These are on-top documents for the SERA performance standard, where all the specific conditions of the specific case are taken into account. And these SERA performance standard with related CPS standards are with related implementation details are right now validated in different pilot projects. So we have 4 different pilot projects with lithium, graphite, cobalt, and rare elements in different regions. All these pilot projects have different mining systems and company sizes from small scale to middle scale over large scale. And all of these have different stages of development. And we are right now validating the CPS and the corresponding IDs, implementation details. As I mentioned, we want to contribute to the harmonization process. So one objective of SERA is that we want to harmonize the certification landscape, and we have 3 steps for that. The first step is the systematic of the CPS for the SERA performance standard, the CAMD structure. The CAMD structure is more or less comparable to the 5-step management approach of the OECD due diligence guideline, as well as the PDCA approach of ISO management standards. It's called the Commitment Assessment Monitoring Improvement and Disclosure process. The second step is that we want to recognize existing internal processes of organizations during the audit to reduce the effort of organizations like ISO management systems, include them, recognize them in the audit process, and then reduce the effort for certification. And we're also developing a standardized framework to harmonize with external certification standards and to support organization in the fragmented certification landscape. This will be done, or this is done by Confidem, and that means that we have a SERA framework, we have different evaluation parameters, and based on these parameters, we want to recognize the external standards, which will be considered during the certification process. And we are right now validating this framework in a European mine. Coming to the chain of custody standard, which includes the concentrate, the run of the mine, and the raw material on the output value chain. The chain of custody standard refers to the mining product or the commodity, the traded commodity, and it also provides criteria for an appropriate management for complete traceability. We are also using different chain of custody models depending on the raw material we have, And we also include ASM and recycling material within our value chain through different approaches. Some features of the chain of custody, as I mentioned, it's right now under development. We want to complete track the commodity flow. We include a blockchain for trustworthiness in combination with the traditional database for business use. As I mentioned within the TraceMed project, that we have this conflict between business confidentiality and mass balance models. So we decided to build up a hybrid model. Monitoring mechanism when it comes to conflict minerals, analytical proof of origins like analytical fingerprinting, RFID. And all this depends on the feasibility between costs, expenses, and benefits. Some bullet points for our hybrid model. It's a decentralized chain of custody application for the SERA standard. That means that no single entity has full control of this chain of custody data. So there is a need for business confidentiality, and therefore we want to develop, or we combine it with traditional database where such information can be held and shared by parties with a trust relationship with the information owner. That means custodians which are having a trusted relationship to their clients, like certification bodies, for example. The SERA readiness standard for investors, for example, is comprehending the exploration and deposit part, and it certifies the reports during the pre-investment steps. It sets out sustainability criteria which needs to be considered before the operating phase, and we also want to standardize the evaluation of resource and research with regard to more sustainability factors, which needs to be considered during the preparation of feasibility studies for mine planning, for example. And at least the final product standard for consumer. It's like the label on the final product, like the fair trade label, for example, for the SERA final product standard, the SERA performance standard, and the SERA chain of custody standard. So the sourcing and the trading of raw materials has to be sustainable, and then a product label will be issued. And it sets out criteria for certification of consumer goods, and therefore it enables decision-making by consumers. This is the final SERA organizational structure. So the standard development is led by DMT, but the standard owner at the end is an independent SERA association, a non-for-profit structure. There, SERA partners, the SERA advisory board, EIT raw materials or others can take part. And then it follows a traditional certification work. We have accreditation bodies which are nominated by the SERA association. We have authorized certification bodies who is doing the certification work, and for example are the custodians for the within the blockchain model or the hybrid application. These are registered at the standard SERA or the SERA association as well, and we have the consultants which are doing normal consultant work in the SERA certification work for companies, and they are also registered at the SERA association. So this is internationally recognized. It's independent, a multi-stakeholder approach, and a not-for-profit approach. This is more or less my last slide. So you are very welcome to become a part of SERA as a member of an advisory board or a partner for pilot phases. On our website, we will publish our next webinar about the SERA performance standard in detail. I think we have the standard available in the next 2 or 3 weeks after the revision and the consultation process. And then we will publish a date for the webinar. And if you're contacting us, you can use the info@SERA standard or directly myself. And for that, thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Lucas, for a very interesting presentation. Just a very quick question. When will this be operational and be able to be used for real, so to say, not as a pilot?
So the SERA performance standard for the operators will be available at the end of the project, so March 2021. So get market ready. This is our deadline. We are right now having having good results from our validation projects. So this is our deadline. The zero chain of custody will be, the rudimental standard will be available in March 2021, and then will be market ready over 1 year. And then we will start, or during this process, we will start with the rudimental structures of the final product standard and the readiness standard in coming project. But the zero performance standard will be market ready at the end of March 2021.
Okay, thank you very much. Very interesting, and we'll come back to you in the discussion later. But we need to move on, and now it's time to welcome Jörgen Sandström, who is head of mining and metals industry at the World Economic Forum. And Jörgen will tell us more about what the World Economic Forum is doing on certification and traceability. So welcome, Jörgen.
Thank you very much. Good morning or good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to this meeting. I am Jörgen Sandström from the World Economic Forum. I head up the World Economic Forum's mining and metals industry community. We are one of 21 industry communities at the forum, and we work together. I have about 30 of the largest mining and metals companies in the world in my community, and we work together on specific initiatives, and we do also work a lot across industry between our industry communities and between the other more issue-oriented platforms on global public goods and technology, cybersecurity, and so on inside the forum. I thought I'd just frame a little bit what we do. We have somewhat reoriented our work since February at the start of the coronavirus. And today the community work in three areas, what we call new paradigm of work, connected value chains, and the third one is accelerated purpose. I thought I mentioned this because I've heard, these three areas connect very well into other sessions that I listened into over the last 2 days, where, for example, in the previous session, they spoke about the lack of engineers who are, competent in the tailing space and so on. So we do a lot of work now currently on increasing the attractiveness of the industry, and also trying to address what are the shortcomings going forward in new types of jobs and upskilling and reskilling needs. And of course, we do a lot of work in the other areas as well. I'll come back to that. I think the discussion here is very much around what we call accelerated purpose. Specifically for mining and metals, there are these, high-level areas of responsible sourcing, decarbonization, and more what was also represented in the previous session around access to sustainable finance and the evolution of ESG metrics, and what is financially material today, which was not financially material, 3 to 5 years ago. As an example, you have today very large corporations who declare bankruptcy over climate change, which was unheard of, 5 years ago. About our project, you can say this project goes back about 2 to 3 years ago, when we had quite a lot of discussions among the leadership teams in my community. What is this blockchain and what can we do about it? And all these companies that I work with, and I would say all companies in all value chains, were being asked to test or try out pilot blockchain in various shapes and forms. And what I'm trying to say is that we faced quite a lot of let's say, feedback or frustration that leadership teams felt that they didn't really know where to turn. Either they were asked to team up with one of these large technology companies, which is not necessarily something you want to do, to commit yourself to a large OEM, or bombarded by small startups who were saying, this is the best technology in the world, why don't you jump on this? So that was one set of frustration. Another one is around, on the marketing side, there's still quite a lot of, let's call it, analog activities going on for how commodities are being traded. We do have commodity companies who recruit young, super well-educated, digital 27-year-olds, and day 4, they put them in front of a fax machine and ask them to operate the fax machine. And this is another set of frustrations. And a third one is around, let's say, the analog world also generates a lot of mistakes and fraud and other issues. And then you have the fourth area, which I think is the key area, which is about what I was trying to say earlier around decarbonization, responsible sourcing, and overall sustainability. We can clearly see that, and it's been a tremendous month, the month of August and September, and it's not stopping. We see large, very important commitments by governments, key end users in our industry, such as the largest tech companies in the world, who are either, let's say, committing themselves to go into net zero or significantly reduce their emission very fast, or they are themselves going upstream, moving into the mining and metal space. And I would say also from discussions I've had that they have already been in this space for quite some time, let's say, tinkering around, experimenting, involving themselves in various demonstrators or pilots. We have well-known cases with Apple, Alcoa, and Rio Tinto in the aluminium space, for example. I have it here, Tesla, who's moving into lithium. Tesla already was upstream. Google, Microsoft, they are already in the metals or mining space. And I think it's worth reflecting on this, because these are today the most powerful companies in the world when it comes to market cap, access to cash, and ability to move swiftly, because they don't have the same, let's say, business models as our industry. So just mentioning this as a sort of strategic framing. For us, it landed in a willingness to explore and try to win together. So this is very much the mission of our initiative. And how can we collaboratively experiment? And what can we do together to, in a way, test this, and what's valuable to do together? The second piece is, to demonstrate joint industry cooperation, industry collaboration. I think most of us know let's say at the global space, we are not very good in collaborating in, I would argue, both the non-competitive and the competitive space. If you compare to other industries like automotive, or, well, if you move into the service industries, insurance companies and so on, they have a very high degree of collaboration. So this is almost like the systemic part of what we are trying to achieve. How can we increase industry collaboration around an emerging technology in this case? We have a number of partners involved at the moment. We are 7 industry partners, and then the World Economic Forum. We have a number of experts involved, technology providers. We have had quite a lot of exchanges with the different types of assurance frameworks out there, the Responsible Steels, Copper Marks, IRMAs, ICMM, of course, and also been in touch with a number of industry associations such as Svemin and other associations to drive this forward. But the key part is the 7 organizations who are working together now, very formally since 1 year. And the, let's say, deliverables are on quite a lot of work was spent discussing a proper use case and how we could conduct a proof of concept. And we landed on, I mean, there's a lot of similarities, you could say, between us and the TraceMet concept or initiative. We also landed on emissions traceability. We felt that this is a extremely important topic. This is where, let's say, the value chains are turning, and we felt that this is something everyone needs to deal with, whether or not it's scope 1, 2, or 3. And it doesn't matter which, let's say, mineral or metal area you are in, you will have to deal with emissions in a sort of a more progressive way going forward. We looked at factors for value and success. I already spoke around the climate impact a bit. I spoke about the response from the industry. We think it's really important that the industry steps up and take, let's say, responsibility of its own future. We have the pressure around supply chain visibility and traceability. We have work underway with what's called carbon accounting frameworks, where there are a number of institutions who are trying to see how these different carbon accounting frameworks can be much better aligned and let's say recognize each other from a metrics and standard point of view. And we have the emissions tracing value in the value chains. Maybe I can just give an example, such as what LME now is introducing this summer, where they have moved from responsible sourcing, as in avoiding children and conflict in the value chain, to now addressing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions. So we have quite active group. We have 2 large calls per week. We have initiated during the spring the proof of concept, which is now being built and soon to be finalized this month. And we have worked a lot of governance, which is something I like to highlight. We anticipate that end of October we'll be able to go out to other companies who would be interested in testing our proof of concept. So that's really the next step, finalizing, evaluating, and testing the proof of concept. I think Eric covered a lot of this. We have simplified because we are talking about quite complex or complicated value chains. But in these kind of early pilots, is about making a simplified value chain and build a model that really can prove. In our case, we are really focusing a lot on proving that you can share data, share sensitive data between organizations. I mean, the technology works. I think maybe a technical point I can add to what the others have said is that we're using the latest version of blockchain technology called Substrate, where you have a lot of interoperability capacities built in that previous generations didn't have. And I stop on this note. I think in my world, the technology works. In my world, it is possible to let's say, tailor this eventually to cater so the technology can really cover also the complexity. I think the hard part is let's say, collaboration and governance. How do you start up a consortium? How do you govern it? How do you agree between competing organizations in those early stages? There are lots of learnings that we have made over the last 5 to 6 years. We have a team who basically only looks at this, collecting learnings, and they have issued a handbook, a toolkit on consortium governance. So feel free to reach out to me because this is where things goes wrong in these collaborations. I stop there, and I hope we have some time for questions and discussions in the panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jörgen. Very, very interesting. Just one quick question that arises when you listen to these different initiatives. And you work on the global scale, Jörgen. How will it be possible to reach an agreement on a global standard around this? Because if it's going to be really functional, I guess we should use the same system, all of us. Do you have any reflections on that?
Well, standard is a broad word, easily confused. I think we do have standards that are functional today. We have reporting standards. We have these, let's say, global standards such as ISO, and we have reporting standards such as TCFD, and we have these assurance frameworks that are specific. They're, let's say, mine site specific ones, IRMA, ICMM. Others, then there are the vertical ones for specific metals or minerals, copper, gold, steel, and so on. There's a family of those that I think are robust, maybe around 10, 12 of these robust assurance frameworks out there. I think they need to work as, let's say, a bit like families, recognize each other, align each other. If you start from the industry side, on the assurance framework side, as I mentioned, on the reporting, these carbon reporting frameworks are working on aligning themselves on metrics and methodologies. And I think it's really important, finally, that governments also either they adopt what the industry is already doing as let's say, best practice. And I think it's important that we don't invent new standards. You know, there is enough stuff out there in these different dimensions. It's very much about, let's say, organizing methodology, nomenclatura, and let's say alignment because in my previous life, I was in the energy space where we had initially competition between, for example, these assurance frameworks, which was really frustrating. They were undermining each other, sort of, let's say, on ESG related matters. So, and this goes back to the 90s when we had competition between, for example, in the paper and pulp side, we had, I forgot the name. The most recognized standard out there is which is stamped on every paper product.
Forest Stewardship Council,
exactly,
I hear you.
Thank you. There were two other standards out there competing, but FSC came out as a winner, but it wasn't exactly overnight. But when the big boys like IKEA and McDonald's publicly went for FSC, things changed. But I think the industry has a key role to play to collaborate, because the level of collaboration is too low today.
I guess it's twofold. It's both the technology in order to follow the information through the value chain, but it's also the sustainability criteria. What is going to be followed. But thank you very much, Jörgen, for your and we'll come back to you in the discussion later. And I think this was quite a good overlap to the next speaker, who is Ben Chalmers, who is the Senior Vice President for Mining Association of Canada. And Ben is going to talk to us about the TSM standard towards sustainable mining, which is one way of looking at sustainability in the mining sector that is actually spreading across the world. So, Ben, I leave over to you. And it's very early in Canada, I understand, so we're very glad that you're with us. Oh, I think you might need to unmute yourself. have you changed microphone is asked here from the technician side? No, because there is a little thing in the corner, I think, that you should look at if it's the right microphone. This is the interesting of having these digital conferences. Now we hear you, Ben.
Now you can hear me? Okay,
yeah,
good. Yes.
That's perfect.
My headset must have switched over somehow. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to address you today. It's been a few years since I was in Sweden speaking to you. I think it was about 2015 when I was last sharing an update on our work here as we were beginning to work with the Finmen around their adoption of TSM, and a lot has happened since then. So we really appreciate the opportunity. So my name is Ben Chalmers. I'm the Senior Vice President of the Mining Association of Canada and have been responsible for overseeing TSM for the last 10 years. And in that time, it has moved from being a Canadian standard to a standard that is implemented across the globe on pretty well all the continents. You can see at the bottom there the current National Association partners that we're working with, and we will soon be adding Australia to that. The Minerals Council of Australia has recently decided to join TSM. We will be more formally announcing that in the new year, but we've begun working on implementation with them. So TSM is a mine site level standard that has been in place for, since 2004. So it has over 15 years of experience with implementation at mine sites. There are a few unique aspects of it. One is that as an association-based standard, it's mandatory across the memberships of the associations that are participating in it, which means that it has broad uptake that happens fairly quickly upon implementation, upon decision to move forward. It was the first of its kind in terms of mine site level standards with independent assurance, multi-stakeholder oversight, and has helped to transform the industry in Canada and is beginning to do so in these other countries. Its focus primarily is on driving performance. Years ago when we first started TSM, when it was created, it was decided by the membership in Canada that we really needed to focus first on performance and use the transparent demonstration of performance improvement to gain any reputational value. Now, an interesting thing about this is, you know, we've heard a lot about the value of standards today in the downstream marketplace and assuring the manufacturers and customers that our metals and minerals are responsibly sourced. TSM didn't start off that way. It started off focused on providing information on environmental and social performance to local communities that are affected by mining, as that was the primary audience. And one of the things that I often remind people of is that, you know, as we work towards satisfying the market drivers today around responsible sourcing, we can't lose sight of the fact that these standards really first and foremost are meant to or need to be meant to benefit the local communities, to ensure that the mines are managed safely and sustainably, to mitigate any negative effects that might spill on to those that live around the mines. One of the unique aspects of TSM is that it's overseen by a series of national advisory panels. So every country that's implementing TSM is required to establish their own multi-stakeholder advisory panel. This is a bit of a picture of what ours looks like in Canada, but there are now similar panels in place in the Philippines, in Argentina, in Finland. The Norwegians just started theirs recently. And so it brings together stakeholders and rights holders to have a national dialogue about mining, in addition to managing a performance standard. So TSM is essentially two things in one. It's a performance standard at the mine site level, and it's a catalyst for a national dialogue about mining that helps direct how TSM evolves in each country. This is a quick snapshot of the kinds of issues that we currently deal with. We have 8 protocols ranging from environmental, social, climate change. In fact, the one listed there around energy use and emission, greenhouse gas emissions, is just in the final processes of being updated to more strongly reflect climate change commitments, and incorporates significant alignment with the TCFD, which is increasingly important in the industry, of course. Other standards that have been recently upgraded include the tailing standard, which was amended to respond to our own tailings failure in Canada, Mount Poly, as well as the lessons learned from Brazil, and is very closely aligned with the new global tailings standard. So there's good equivalency there, and we're working to address a few outstanding gaps. One of the points that I would make here before, without going into detail about all of these, is the banner at the bottom that points to the fact that all of these standards are developed with the very close collaboration with the multi-stakeholder, the community advisory panel, so that it's really a consensus between industry and communities of interest around the performance standards that we apply to ourselves. TSM consists right now, at least in Canada, of 30 indicators. So you can see all of the different boxes representing the different indicators. There's 5 indicators focused on Indigenous and community relationships and 5 on tailings. And you can see some of the other areas. I'm not going to go through detail, of course, with only a few minutes to present on this. But one of the points I would make here is that a unique part of TSM is the fact that each country that implements TSM has the ability to modify and adapt these standards to their own national context. So you're not taking on a Canadian standard, you're taking on a standard that originated in Canada, but really has that ability to be tailored to become a made for Sweden approach. Common areas around amendments include the sort of how Indigenous people are dealt with in the standard, because each country has a different context around how they work with their Indigenous people. Our Indigenous people require different kinds of engagements than, say, the experience in Norway and Finland with the Sami people, which would likely be closer aligned to your own context. In Finland, again, for example, they added a mine closure protocol because they don't have the kinds of regulations that we have in Canada, and the Australians have indicated that they would probably like to enhance protections around cultural heritage for obvious reasons. So that ability to adapt TSM is really important. It's a 5-level scale. It's not a binary system. Sites are graded from C to AAA, with A being good practice. That's the aspirational goal, to get everyone to a level A, and then companies will decide on their own whether they want to go into the leadership areas of AA and AAA. The data is incredibly easy to transmit and to digest. It's presented as a dashboard. This is one example from one of our members, IM Gold, that shows the scores attained in all of the indicators for each of their mines. So IM Gold reports their performance on 3 different mines, actually one in Canada, one in Burkina Faso, and one in Suriname. And so this data efficiency makes it very easy to incorporate into traceability schemes. Like, I think this would potentially be easy to plug into the TraceMet program that we heard about earlier. At the industry level, this is just one slide to show the kinds of ways in which TSM has transformed the industry. When we first started this, 2006 is our first year of verified data, and only about 50% of our membership could meet or exceed that level A standard in community engagement. Today, we're over 90%, and you'd see similar patterns if you looked at many of the other standards like tailings or biodiversity. And so this is measurably able to help to track the performance improvement. It has also helped us significantly with advocacy, to be able to share with our stakeholders, with our government and others, the fact that the industry is driving this kind of performance plays a big role in helping us to be more effective in terms of advocating for the industry. Of course, every every standard has to have a strong assurance process in order to be effective. This is a quick overview of ours. It's based on a foundation of self-assessment, where every year the company's mines will self-assess against the standard, report those. Every third year, the results are verified by an external verifier that's accredited by the standard. And then that community of interest panel that I spoke about earlier also plays a role in that every year they'll select 2 companies to appear before it and go into a deeper examination of the results. And on another time, perhaps if there's interest, I can spend a lot more time talking about how that works, because it's a pretty important part of the structure. Jorgen talked about the importance of these standards adopting a more community approach and starting to work together. This is just a quick highlight of some work we've been doing with several other standards, including ICMM,
I think something happened here in the from Canada. Should we put on the Menti questions maybe while we're waiting, see if we can get the connection back with Ben Chalmers? We had 2 Menti questions that we post to you, and the Menti number is here, so you can see it. And if you haven't replied, you still have the chance to do it. But we will start with the first question. See if we can get that one on the screen.
Do we have the Menti questions in? Yeah, there we go.
And the first question was, how often do you think about the origin of metals in products, as you might think of the origin of food products, for example? And it's obvious that most people recently started to think about this, but I'm very happy to see that in this crowd, at least, we have 1/3 that always have thought about these questions. But I guess this is quite a unique crowd, is my guess. And the next question was around how much extra would you be willing to pay for a product that contains certified or sustainably produced metals? And here you could stretch from 0 to 100% more. Yeah. And the average is around 30% actually. So this is the result of the Menti questions that we had. And I think Ben is back. I get the information here from the technician that Ben is back to see if he can finalize his presentation.
Hello.
Hi, Ben. Something happened with your connection.
I got a note that someone started a new meeting and it ended.
That was strange. This is very interesting with this digital technology. It's good when it's working. We're very happy that you can join us from Canada in this early time at your where you are. So let's see if we can have the presentation up again. Is that back?
I'm sharing my screen. Are you able to?
Yes, now we can see it.
Okay.
So I just spoke about the Menti questions here in between. But now you're back to finalize your presentation.
Okay. So just a couple more slides here, but I wanted to point to a few areas where some of that collaboration that Jorgen called for is starting to happen. So this is a new piece of work that we're anticipating finalizing in November that creates 100% equivalencies or aims to create 100% equivalencies with several other key standards in this space, including the ICMM, the World Gold Council's Responsible Gold Mining Principles, the Copper Mark, and the Risk Readiness Assessment. And the idea here is that by incorporating this additional protocol into TSM, mines will be able to use the TSM reporting and assurance framework to be eligible or to demonstrate that they've satisfied all of the requirements for these other standards. So if you're a copper mine or a copper gold mine, for instance, and you're interested in the Copper Mark and the Responsible Gold Mining standards, you don't have to do 2 separate reporting or 3 separate reporting initiatives. You report through TSM, you assure through TSM, using the protocols plus this new piece of work, the TSM Responsible Sourcing Alignment Supplement, and you will be able to get all of the credit for all of these standards. So it's sort of the first really significant move in this mining standard space at true harmonization and alignment. So we're very excited about this. There's a couple of other examples of how TSM has come quite some way in recent years since we last addressed your members. This example comes from Sustainalytics in the sustainability rating space for investment purposes. They launched a new tailings indicator last year, and the only way to achieve top marks in that indicator are through TSM or IRMA. So we were quite pleased to see the work we've done on tailings reflected in this space and actually starting to be used by investors and potentially the insurance industry as well to better assess the stability and responsible management of tailings. This is actually a traceability project that we've tied into. It's one that's been led by the Royal Canadian Mint, some of the Canadian banks, and a few of our members to trace the responsibly sourced gold that's mined in various parts of Canada, and then have investment certificates traded on it. It's called TradeWinds Origin, and incorporates TSM as a measure of responsible sourcing. So this is, I think, the first sort of proof of concept where we are able to add our data into a blockchain system, and would love opportunities to explore more similar projects like this. This is a supplier responsibility standard produced by Apple, where they recognize a number of different standards, including TSM. There's a couple of blank boxes there that will be filled potentially next year by that supplement that I talked about. And so this is just sort of a demonstration of how TSM is increasingly being recognized amongst major brands as a way of demonstrating responsible sourcing. So none of these examples were available to us in 2015 when I was last there to speak to you. And I think it goes to show the growth that TSM is has underway right now, both in terms of the number of countries that are applying this, as well as the way it's being recognized in the market space. So I'll stop there and really appreciate the opportunity to share this with you today.
Thank you very much, Ben. Very interesting. And as you said rightly, this was discussed in the Svemin board in 2015, I think it was last time. But a lot has happened since then, and I definitely think that it's time to take a renewed discussion on whether Sweden might join the TSM in the coming years. But thank you. We are running a little bit short of time, so I will need to move on to the panel. And let's see if we can get the panel up here. It's actually all the former speakers, but also 3 new persons. And I would like to turn first to our 3 new persons in the panel. And I would like to start by asking Sara Olsson, who's Sustainability Advisor at Boliden Smelters, on your reflections on the topic today on traceability and certification. How would that be useful for Boliden as a company, as a producing company of metals? So, Sara.
Yes. Yes, hello. It would definitely be useful for several reasons, which has to some extent been touched upon on the previous presentations as well. I mean, we are a mining and smelting company, but 50% of our raw materials are originating from external mines. So an important part of our sourcing activities is sustainability, and to ensure that our supply is contributing to rather than breaching human rights, environmental standards, and anti-corruption and bribery laws, we need to have a comprehensive process for evaluating our suppliers and to live up to sustainability standards. Today, this is very often a time-consuming and an administrative effort, and here a solution for that would certainly be certified origins, and to have a chain of custody systems that can align all these different assurance systems that is being presented today. So in this sense, we are truly welcoming all these different initiatives that is popping up. We have we are engaged in the copper market and the development of that, for instance. But secondly, as Jörgen touched upon a lot, there is a renegotiation of what trading of metals is now and will be in the future. And here the certified origin also is key. Our metals are first and foremost traded on the LME, but I think, so today it's the metal prices there that we are sort of competing on, but going forward, it is also clear that sustainability, for all the reasons that has been discussed during this seminar, should also serve that purpose. So if we can certify the origin of our metals, we can also compete with our products under the sustainability point of view. Yeah.
Could I ask you a question there, Sarah, as well? Do you get questions around this from customers today, or is this something that you see is coming further into the future, or is it happening already today?
So the past years, we have certainly seen an increase in questions around our sustainable operations in regards of the scope of responsible sourcing. But lately, we also see an increased demand from our customers, which is mainly based in Northern Europe, that is interested to see what is our carbon footprint, how much recycled content do we have. So it's clearly increasing demand, and it's going quite fast as well.
And do you think that they will be interested in paying a little bit more in order to get a low carbon copper, for example?
That is, of course, something we would hope for, but and also as we saw in this Menti question, it looks good. And I think it's also, I mean, it's not, one part is to get a premium for sustainable copper, for instance, but there's also a lot of other value that comes to it. If we are a sustainable smelter, we might be also a customer that other mines are willing to sell their products to in order to ensure that their minerals that they are producing responsibly is further treated as responsible downstreams.
Mm-hmm. And with that, I will put the question to the next person, which is quite logical. Priscilla, I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce your last name. Gerbe?
It's perfect.
Sorry.
I get all sorts.
I'm sorry. And you're the global category manager at ABB Motors and Generators, and you're with us from Zurich today. And you are sort of representing the customer perspective in this. What is your view on traceability and certification, and also the question around to pay a premium for example, certified metals? Would that be interesting in the future for ABB?
Absolutely. So ABB is doing their new sustainability strategy as we speak, and there is a very strong emphasis on sustainability, especially for our products and our systems. We are trying to address solutions, but very much in parallel with sustainability requirements that are in this new world that we are facing. And therefore, I think especially this product or this project that we are still working with IBL is leading the technology that we want to represent. We want to be at the front of it and make sure that our customers are getting the benefit. Now, you ask me, how much are they willing to pay? I think that's always, to start, everybody will say nothing. And me being a purchaser, I don't want to pay for anything. But you will see that with time, people will have incentive cycles. So if all of a sudden governments do go ahead with taxation, that would be a dramatic incentive for them. And I am aiming for that we have that compliance to fulfill, because that's the kick that we need in order to support the industry to have these systems that will help us to later on make it a broad wide solution. So far, all the different teams that have presented today, they are really speaking to what we want to see and where we want to see ourselves as a company.
But are you today asking questions to your suppliers of raw materials and metals, or is that still on the way, so to say?
I think companies have asked, probably in the last 15 years, a lot of questions. First was what kind of ISO certification you have. Can you please sign our supplier code of conduct, which has a touch on social responsibility, and you have a backslash on origin and sustainability, but there was no metrics added to it. And therefore, open to interpretation, I would say. When you don't put a measure, that people will just find whatever is convenient. And now the company is going to the next level. So they are defining goals and objectives for the company itself, and that will be in parallel to our suppliers. So we are asking our suppliers, where are in this journey across the world? And they all went very quickly ahead, sending us their greenhouse emissions. But there is nothing they have of what I could see today in terms of a certificate for greenhouse emissions or recycled content.
Okay, thank you. And I'll invite the last person who is new in the panel, Tobias Persson, and you are a senior advisor at the Swedish Growth Policy Analysis, a governmental organization. And I know that you have also conducted some research around these issues. So what is your thoughts on what have you heard today?
Thank you, Maria. And I think, and I believe we have seen 4 different presentations showing the solutions and also the challenges of traceability and the system for metals and minerals. And I think it's been a topic which has been increased in popularity, and also it's timely, since today compared to a decade ago, we have much better ET solutions in blockchains and cloud computing, making possible for monitoring much better. At the same time, we can see that branding companies have a higher pressure on them to actually monitor sustainability risks in the supply chains. And of course, we can see in these presentations that we have some challenges ahead, and if you build ET solutions like this, it's always a problem. The weakness is what you put into these systems. And that means that we have to agree on, for example, how to calculate the CO2 emissions and what sustainable sourcing of metals, which has been seen in many of these presentations. And Eric was telling us that the devil is in the details, and I totally agree on that. But there you have the money and the power for different companies and organizations. And of course, this means that there's also a risk of greenwashing and rent seeking when you actually develop the information going into blockchains or cloud computing. And of course, you can also see that we have a lot of market challenges here, what I can see at least from my research, that the firms prioritize risk traditionally, which is under strict governmental regulation. So they have a good monitoring of risk related to, for example, conflict minerals and REACH, which targeting hazardous materials and chemicals. And then when you have this strict regulation, the companies usually have a good monitoring. But when you go outside these areas, you immediately see weaknesses. That means that it gets difficult if you don't have a government strict regulation to actually target traceability system for whole supply chains in areas without this type of regulation. And for example, in CO2 emissions, if you go to the automotive industry, they focus their monitoring of the supply chains on the use of renewable energy and recycled metals, recycled aluminum, recycled steel, which is technology specific, while for instance, if we go to the building sector instead, they are focused on the carbon footprint of steel and the other materials used in the construction. So,
but do you perceive, Tobias, that there should be sort of global demands on traceability? Because I guess it might be quite differentiated demands if each nation or each region in the world were to implement different demands.
In the long end, since we deal with global value change, it has to be global traceability systems. Otherwise, they can't talk to each other. And of course, in the beginning, we will see examples like TraceMet focus on the Swedish case, Swedish supply chain. But in long end, you have to converge and agree on, as many have told us here, that you have common standards and common systems that most companies in the world actually can work on.
Thank you very much, Tobias. And I know that we have got several questions here through Menti, and one that I was told that I'm going to ask to Lucas and Eric is what are you competing, or are you actually no, now I think we got the Menti questions back here. Are you a competing initiatives, Sera and TraceMet, for example? And I think that's for real goes for all these initiatives. And connecting to what Tobias just said, we need a global system for this. So are you competing or not? Eric, would you like to start?
Yes, I would like to start. No, I wouldn't say that we are competing in that sense. Perhaps you notice that RISE is a partner of in both projects, so there's actually a very hands-on kind of on some levels cooperation and information and solution exchange rather than competition. And we have, as I guess was present in the presentations, slightly different scopes as well. But we are running our in different tracks, so it's not that the projects are actually coordinated either. So in the end, when we leave the pilot phases and try to go commercial, if that is the case for both projects, then it's an open question, I guess, but not at this stage now.
Lucas, do you have a brief comment?
Yes, I agree, and especially the hands-on guy. He's using a lot of technical aspects which he learned from both projects. Therefore, different developments has been done within this area. We focusing a bit on the hybrid application to also use some kind of business application at the end, which is led by different custodians. So it is more a business application at the end, and but it can be added with, for example, the results of TraceMet, with the carbon foot performance, with the recycling content within the cycle. So this system can be added by different other projects like TraceMet.
Okay. And I'm going to turn to Linus here in the studio to see if we have any other question to the panel.
Well, yeah, we do. I'm going to start with a pretty straightforward question to Ben here. It's on TSM. Must a Canadian mining company who also have mines in other countries follow the standards for all mine sites, or only the mine sites in the country that has committed to TSM?
Well, thanks for the question. So the requirement for application, the condition of membership applies to mines in the country that TSM is being operated in. So it applies to the mines in Canada for us, in Argentina and Finland and Norway, for example. It would apply to the mines in those countries. Part of the challenge is that our industry is very multinational in scope, and it's not within the mandate of a national association like our own to dictate how such standards are applied globally. We do facilitate the international adoption, so you'll have noticed that in the example I used with IM Gold, they applied in Burkina Faso and Suriname. Those weren't on the the partner countries that I listed because they have chosen to apply TSM in those countries, and so we facilitate that, but we're not in a position to mandate it, unfortunately.
All right, thank you very much. Also, I have a great last question here. I think we are running out of time soon, but I got this right now here. I don't believe that anyone will pay a premium. Frontrunners will simply be better placed to adapt when the new market rules are set for all. What would panelists say to convince me that I'm wrong? I guess it's an open question. Who wants to go first? Jörgen, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think the premium is, as was said, I think by Sara in a couple of comments, premium are not just price. Premium is also other things, that are valuable. Longer contracts, or you're being a preferred partner, and I think that list is quite long. And I think the space is in converging or aligning really fast. So coming back to the previous question, I would say it's absolutely essential that the industry start working together. I think to answer the previous question as well, I think the initiatives are not competing. We are very small experiments, but at the end of the day, a standard, let's say a TSM, gives you 80, let's say 90% guidance on what to do, but there's also a lot of room that you have to fill yourself, and that's also where these experiments or pilots are sort of testing. What and how should you report, or what can you do to reduce emissions, as in our case.
Okay, I think actually, thank you very much. We could have continued this discussion for a very long time, I think, and we will most definitely come back to the issue around traceability and certification, because I'm quite sure that this is part of the future for the mining and metal industry. So thank you very much to all the speakers and the panelists for your cooperation and that being part of this. And when we end the conference, because this is the whole conference ending, I would like to invite Lars-Åke to the scene. Lars-Åke is the Svemin expert on environmental issues, and the one who is threatening us to retire actually also soon. So now I would like to ask Lars-Åke, what are your takeaways from this environmental conference that we've had today? And do you have any messages for the mining industry that you could give now when you are going to retire?
I still have a couple of months to think about the message, I think. But the big takeaways from the 2 days, I think, is that there's a strong will to cooperate. I think that's one word that's reoccurring in the different sessions. And I think that actually this conference and the setup with this digital conference is showing that there are new ways to cooperate, and which is very encouraging. And I hope that also for others participants, that their takeaway was that this is a sector that wants to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And I also, even though we have, I guess we're running out of time, but allow me one reflection as having been 35 years in the sector. And Emma mentioned this morning that we had the first conference in '99. We had that conference with 40 participants in Skellefteå. We were discussing dam safety. I was part of the planning for that one, and I've been part of the planning for this one. It was a great disappointment this spring when we realized that we cannot go to Kiruna for this year's conference. But the way it turned out, I think we should be very happy. As you said, I think in the introduction, this gave new opportunities to get speakers from all around the world, and I'm very grateful for all the speakers that have participated. Some of you answered positively in very short notice, and I think it's been great. Thank you so much.
And I think we need to wrap this conference up, unfortunately, even though we would like to continue the discussion in many ways with you all. We have some occasions where you actually could meet Svemin digitally again. We have one seminar with women in mining, which I think is on the 5th of November. That is going to be very interesting. It is about gender issues. And then we also have the autumn conference for Svemin, which is scheduled for the 17th of November this year. That will also be a digital event this year. And please feel free to contact us if you have any reflections after this. And I know also that you will get a questionnaire evaluating the conference sent out later today, most probably. And we've also got questions around the presentations, and as soon as we get the permission from the speakers, and we hope we will get it from most of them, we will publish the presentations on the Svemin website. So we will send a link with that as well to you who have been in the audience. So with those words, I would like to say thank you and close this year's environmental conference.